In this video, guys, I just want to share with you the 41 gun salute in honor to His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Great Britain is in a deep sorrow because we lost our Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. So I'll show you guys. This video, guys, is a courtesy of Sky News. Thank you.
Not only first thing this morning, but also yesterday. And the guns will start in 30 seconds to fire this death gun salute in marking a life of service to the Queen by her consort. And these will be echoed at 6 other locations and also on board 2 ships at sea and in Gibraltar.
Yeah, mute.
It has just gone noon. You're watching Sky News live coverage of the death gun salute to mark the Duke of Edinburgh, who died yesterday. And returning to Edinburgh Castle, where there is now time for the gun which has just fired to be reloaded, and also time to reflect again on how the Duke of Edinburgh had carried the name of this city, the capital of Scotland, in his life all around the world. And for him, therefore, this firing of the gun has its own significance as the next gun is fired. We now go across the country to London, where the simultaneous second shot has been fired by the Honourable Artillery Company, the oldest regiment in the British Army, the Tower of London, where the crown jewels of the United Kingdom are stored, and to which the Duke came on a number of occasions, not least when he was appointed by the Queen to be the chairman of the Coronation Committee just after she came to the throne and organised the coronation in 1953. It is the great citadel of England, and it is the well-known guarding point at the entrance of London, where the Prince did so much of his service to the Queen, working from Buckingham Palace. And at Cardiff Castle too, preparing for this gun salute. You'll see the firing and then the discharge of the shell case. They are, of course, blank firing today, but these guns, new battle, and they were guns that were in operation and in service in some of the battlefields that were being fought hard over when the Duke of Edinburgh, as a young officer in the Royal Navy, was, along with the Army and the Royal Air Force across all the Allies, fighting against the Axis powers of tyranny in the Second World War. In Cardiff, the Red Dragon flying at half-mast. Over to Hillsborough Castle too, in Northern Ireland, where the gun is prepared to fire. Hillsborough Castle, which is the official residence of the Queen when she is in Northern Ireland. Of course, throughout the Queen's reign, the struggles for security and peace within a nation that has a history of discord has been very much a part of the Queen's reign. And we remember when the Duke of Edinburgh accompanied the Queen to go to Ireland on that historic state visit, and also what a great deal it had meant to him to see peace returned there after the struggles of that time, particularly with the loss of his uncle, Lord Mountbatten. But to Devonport, and the Royal Navy are firing their guns, also in salute, at Devonport, the historic and largest of the naval bases of Europe.
Number one gun! Fire!
Wearing the anti-flash that is always worn on board ship, particularly when guns firing in battle. Battles that Prince Philip, as I say, remembered very much, seeing start in Italy at the beginning of his service in the Second World War, and suddenly realising, as he said, and then they all started firing back, and you suddenly realised that this was real war. He was also out in Japan at the time that the peace was finally signed at the end of hostilities in 1945. We now go to Woolwich, with its ancient history as a scene of the revictualling of ships nearby at Deptford, and the Royal Horse Artillery are preparing to fire their guns, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. The guns here are firing in front of the largest frontage of any building of the Georgian period, 1,000 feet long, massive building with the guns laid out in front of the centre of that building where the old officers' mess and Duke of Edinburgh frequently went as a guest there, because his reach into the armed forces was so considerable as a field marshal for longer than anyone else had ever been in. Going to Portsmouth next, and at Portsmouth, where so many occasions a young naval officer, Prince Philip, would have set out to sea to play his part in the battles. And again, the anti-flash will remind us of what warfare's like in a ship. And perhaps one of the most dangerously protected areas during the Second World War was in Gibraltar, where the great guns were protecting the entrance to the Mediterranean and through which their submarine nets. The Prince saw that preparation as the guns fired there too. Enormous amount of smoke, and the Royal Gibraltar Regiment will, after all, had to defend the rock through some very difficult times in history, going way back to the very start of its part of British ownership. Back to Edinburgh Castle and the seat of the Dukedom of Edinburgh, and the gun is about to be fired.
Fire!
And it's a beautiful day in Edinburgh too, with the wonderful views from the castle. I'm very proud to be its governor at the moment, and I'm very proud too of the excellence of the Royal Regiment of Artillery in delivering this salute to the Duke of Edinburgh. And what a day. And the Duke, who loved Scotland, he was educated at Gordonston, he was up at Balmoral with the royal family frequently, and each year the Queen and he came up for Royal Week to mark the duties, and particularly opening the Scottish Parliament when that moment came. So looking back around the country, all the various places, not least Gibraltar, as they prepare to fire again. The Duke of Edinburgh was made Colonel of the Welsh Guards quite soon after the Queen came to the throne, and so with the Welsh Guards that service continued and his connections with the Principality carried on until his son, the Prince of Wales, took on that title and the Duke stepped away for the Grenadier Guards. But again, a sense of the reach of the Duke of Edinburgh into so many parts of British life, United Kingdom life, and also out around the Commonwealth. And these gun salutes have been fired in others of the Queen's realms, and earlier on today in Australia too, outside the Parliament building in Canberra. But back to Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland. Again, the soldiers firing here are reservists from 105 Regiment Royal Artillery, and they are the same regiment as are firing in Edinburgh Castle. All reservists, all who have trained and prepared over the last 2 days, but always been on tenterhooks for the responsibility of delivering this salute on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen to her husband. He was just 2 months short of his 100th year being complete, and today, the 10th of April, his birthday would have been the 10th of June. So, as we move on round the United Kingdom to Plymouth, and an echo again of the many times that the young naval officer, or as a senior admiral, he came in and out of this great Devonport dockyard.
Number 1 gun! Fire!
Not too much fuss, the Duke of Edinburgh often used to say about any arrangements for his funeral, and one can only understand that despite this constant desire to stick a pin into the pomposity of British life, he recognised that as the Queen's husband, this is a part of the Queen's life, and it is the way the United Kingdom marks its passing through time. Back with the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, who were given that name by Prince Philip's father-in-law, King George VI, when he visited them once. They were called the Riding Troop. He crossed out the word riding and put Kings. When the Queen came to the throne, she insisted that the name of her father be marked going forward. And you heard the officer commanding there, who is also known as the commanding officer of the King's Troop, and Major Victoria Flood said it is a privilege for all those from the King's Troop to be commemorating the passing of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. It is a responsibility we do not hold lightly, and one that is an honour. They brought the horses out to bring the guns here to the front of Woolwich earlier today. And Rhiannon, as we go back to Gibraltar, it is perhaps interesting to reflect upon, as these guns go on firing with the excellence of the armed forces' strict adherence to discipline and timing, that we'll hear the first gun just before. For Gibraltar.
Number 1 gun! Fire! Fire!
And I was going to say to you, Rhiannon, that they mark each gun as it's fired in a little tiny leather wallet, and they stick a little pin through the card in the centre to make sure that they fire precisely 41 guns. But what a day, Rhiannon.
I think for the royal family and for people across this nation and across the Commonwealth, this is an important moment for them to mark the death of the Duke of Edinburgh in those significant traditional ways. Yesterday we saw a notice being posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace, on the gates of the Palace of Holyrood House, marking what is a significant moment for this nation as we say goodbye to Britain's longest serving consort. Of course, we have to remember that this is a family who are in mourning now. We pay our respects to Her Majesty the Queen, now a widow, remembering those moments that she shared with her husband, but also here at Windsor Castle, the crowds wanting to come out and pay their own respects to a man who has left the most remarkable personal legacy, both for this country and also for countries across the Commonwealth. His death has given us an opportunity to look back on hundreds of hours of video footage and thousands of photographs, which really helped to highlight that enduring working partnership but also that love match that developed between the Queen and the Duke during 73 years of marriage. And these moments, yes, are important to mark the traditional moments, to have the gun salutes, to have the flags at half-mast. But this is a family who, behind palace walls, will also be marking the death and mourning the loss of a man who meant so much to all of them.
And Rhiannon, as the gun salutes were getting underway across the UK, we saw the Earl and Countess of Wessex driving past our live position here, past the crowds gathering outside Windsor Castle. The Countess of Wessex had her window down, tears in her eyes, and she spoke to you as she passed. What did she say?
She did, and she said to me, I asked, how are you all? And she simply said, the Queen has been amazing, with tears in her eyes. And I think it was quite a moment to see her husband, Prince Edward, in the driving seat, the Countess Sophie sitting alongside him, driving slowly past our live position here, but also stopping to have a few words with some of the crowds who gathered. And
she was saying thank you to people who'd come here, wasn't she?
She was, and I think it's a difficult balancing act for the royal family at the moment. Yesterday we were told that they wanted to take some private time to mark the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, which is completely understandable. But also there is this awareness that we are still living in these times of the coronavirus pandemic and the restrictions that are in place. And they do not want to be seen to be encouraging crowds to gather, but really spontaneously today we can see there are so many people here, hundreds of people gathering, wanting to bring flowers, wanting to pay their respects, and wanting to mark what is a significant moment in our nation's history. And so I think for the Earl and Countess of Wessex, they wanted to slowly take that time to drive past the crowds and, in a socially distanced way, be able to say their thanks, because they will of course have been aware of the thousands of tributes coming from across the country, from around the world, people having their own recollections and memories of meeting the Duke of Edinburgh.
And I think that moment, seeing the Countess of Wessex there, very much summed up that public grief and that private mourning as well. Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. For now, let's return now to the 41 gun salute, the Tower of London now. Alistair.
Well, it reminds me very much of the fact that Prince Philip had two appointments that he really treasured, that his forebear, Prince Albert, the Prince Consort, also held. One was Chancellor of Cambridge University, but the other, very close to the Tower of London, is Trinity House, that look after all the lighthouses up and down the nation. And for a book that I was putting together with a photographer called Julian Calder, we took his photograph as the master of Trinity House on Deptford Strand. And he came into the photograph saying, "Come on, you've only got a few seconds." And he was in a bit of a sort of hurry, and he was never easy having his photograph taken. He absolutely hated it. And as we wait just for the gun to fire, but Julian, the photographer, said from...
Goodbye, Prince Philip, Your Royal Highness, Duke of Edinburgh. Great Britain, if not the whole world, will deeply miss you. Rest in peace.